What's going on, Soul Nation, and welcome to another New World video. We haven't talked about New World here on the channel for quite some time, and that's honestly because the devs haven't been making content, and the content that they've been making has already kind of been played out. But that's been their whole strategy all of 2024, and that's going to lead us to ask some critical questions. Namely, can they rebuild the trust? And will New World Aternum be worth returning to this coming October? And that's what we're going to explore in this video. If you guys like New World and MMORPG content, you're in the right spot. If you feel like these videos earn your subscription, sound off in the comments, just like MJK, I'm gonna butcher the name, Korofov, and as After Hours have said that I've earned their sub. So welcome in, guys, to the channel. We are slowly but surely marching our way up to the 20,000 subscriber markers. So I do thank you guys so much. But this is the state of the game, and while we explore the answers to those questions that I proposed, I think it's important that we spend some time in the numbers. And the numbers don't lie; they tell a very interesting story. Now, if you've seen any of my previous content, I'm a consummate defender that it is not a number of real importance, the concurrent player base, namely because people take and confuse concurrent for total player base. But since I'm not playing New World this minute, then I wouldn't actually count on this chart, but it does tell you the effect that the announcements in June had. And if we look at that, you can see a huge drop in player retention coming off of the heels of that announcement. Now, since the expansion released, we have seen a continual decline in players. This is natural. I'm never really worried about players stepping away from the game. The real sign of health in any video game is, do they return, and are new players joining in the fray? And these numbers don't reflect that, but we can still extrapolate some important information. The June announcement, it's now been long enough. You can see here almost 20% in June. That's a 20% drop, followed by an almost 30% drop in July. And over the last 30 days, it's slowed down a bit because you still have people actively playing the game because you can, and they are sticking with it. Now, content is king. When it's all said and done, the general rule, will these numbers turn green? Yes. The question is how much will they turn green? Well, time will tell, and October is the deadline. So let's talk about what's been going on in the game in and of itself. They've had the console closed beta test. Now, I did not participate in the console closed beta, but you can see here they're tweeting out some different stats, talking about most popular weapon is the bow, followed by the sword, and then followed by the void gauntlet. Most popular archetype, sword bearer, ranger, and occultist. And for those of you who are checking out this video and you haven't been following the New World Aternum, when you start the game, you're going to have a couple of different archetypes. The system underlying it is still the same. Once you get into the game, you can equip the different weapons and create your own build. But in order to streamline the console experience without having to, I guess, unneeded stress on players, they're creating several different archetypes, which give you some starting advantages. But in the long run, you're still able as a player to do whatever you want. Over 682,000 quests were completed. INDRA was the deadliest enemy, and enemies killed were over 3.6 million. Now, I don't know how these numbers reflect with what we've seen. I saw Jay actually report on this, so let's let Jay take it over for here, and we'll come back and talk about these numbers.
So it's a little bit awkward to show, but here we're looking at New World database, and they basically leaked the play numbers that were on the beta servers. Now, if you're worried about, like, you don't actually know what I'm talking about, there is a closed beta, New World Aternum closed beta on console only, and it's running right now. If you really want to get into that, by the way, you probably can. There's still a billion keys everywhere, I believe. But that test is closed, and you can only play it on console. I don't have a console, so I haven't played it, and it looks like not many people are playing it, to be honest. So there were a couple of things with New World database. The numbers were sort of revealed where you can see an obvious jump when the test went live here, right? It went from 4,500 basically to 6,000. And that actually appears to be sort of where it's steadied out. Actually, the numbers appear to have gone up here, which is a little bit weird. I don't know if that's just because it's the weekend. Because actually, when you have a look on it on a day-to-day basis, the numbers went down. But then maybe it's because EU opened up. Maybe that helped. I think basically this was live when the servers went live, but this wasn't live. So you can see this first day might not actually be a true reflection. Maybe it is because it does say 1,500 there, so maybe it is. Also worth noting, by the way, that the server capacity is 4,000. Obviously, they didn't get anywhere near that, but interesting. I wonder if that's to do with the new layering technology that they've probably been testing out. But the point is, I don't know if you've seen this. I don't know if you've seen like Jukesoft's video. They were trying to give away keys for a new world Aternum, and they simply have failed. By the way, this is my gaming PC. I only use this when I'm streaming or recording. I am subscribed. I'm just subscribed on my other channel, so, you know, on my other account. So don't judge me, you little sausages. But yeah, they've been struggling to give away keys, and I think that is reflected in the play numbers. It's not very high. Now, this is a bit of a controversial one. I think New World needs to turn this off. I don't think we should be able to see the console play numbers. A lot of other companies hide the numbers by releasing on their own launcher and stuff like that. Whilst I'm pro having the numbers, it lets us make informed decisions. The reality is, it also lets us beat them over the head with it. So I would personally disable this, but, you know, I'm happy they don't for now because it lets me see what they're doing. But yeah, if they're struggling to get people to play New World Aternum right now in a closed beta that's free, how are they going to get people to pay $60, $70 or whatever the hell it is? That would be a major concern for me if I was Amazon Games.
So Jay shares a lot of interesting numbers from New World database, and I think this is something that we really need to break down and talk about. He asks a question right at the end of the clip, like, if they're struggling to get people to play a beta on the console, what is this going to entail this coming October? How are people going to be enticed to spend the $40, the $60, the $80, $90 on whatever version that they want for this game? The good news, obviously, for the PC players who have the expansion, this is just a free update. And I think that's going to be one aspect that a lot of people are going to be very curious about what has changed and all of that. And we'll be covering all of that here for you guys, by the way. So if you really are interested, and even if you're not planning on returning, if you want to make sure that you're up to date on all of the things that are happening, I'll be sure to be giving it my full coverage here on the channel. But here is the answer to that question, and it will be interesting to see. A service like Game Pass is going to be something that I think they probably need to consider using. Now, I would prefer if they actually just announced that it was coming to Game Pass right out the gate before the game even came out. Even before Jay's video came out, I wish they would have made that style of announcement, because no matter what, once they make the announcement, because of people's lack of faith and trust in Amazon, which I feel, especially with how 2024 has been handled by the team, they've more than earned that distrust, and it's going to take a lot to get it back. Can they get it back? Well, if you think that No Man's Sky is in a good position, the answer is yes. If you think Final Fantasy XIV is in a good position, the answer is yes. It just is a higher cost level of effort when it's just easier to do it right the first time. That's the lesson my dad always taught me. Do the job once, do it right, go home and enjoy your life rather than keep having to go back to that grinding wheel. But there is some real positivity here. Anyhow, I think Game Pass, PlayStation Plus, those different services, if New World was to kind of jump in on that aspect, New World needs players. And I also still hope that we get to see the numbers. We can break down the concurrent numbers. Again, concurrency does not represent the full total player base, but it is still something very interesting. And in an MMO who needs players, that is, it is a little bit of a sign of health overall. Again, I always highly value returning in new players. Like, what is that level? How long does a player usually go on a break? I see in the comments, I have a lot of data as a content creator where I see people will be on a break for a year or 2 years, but then come back and have a really good time playing all the new content and then essentially stepping away. Having an ebb and flow, I think, is a natural sign of health, and I think it's a natural thing. And that's where the team actually has more work. They have more work to do, not in the release of with the October New World Eternum release, but actually with what follows it up. And they are saying that roadmap will be shared once New World Eternum is out and about and in the wild. And that's what we'll explore here next in this video. The final thought regarding the console closed beta is some of these numbers I think are really high, and they don't necessarily represent what we've seen from Jay's video. So it is possible that you ended up having a smaller player base testing the game, but they had a hard time setting it down. And that's the experience that generally people have when they step into this game. It really can grab you. It really does have the hooks necessary to actually become, I think, an incredible MMO. But that's also where things get a little bit strange. But over on Redbeard Flynn, he points out a couple of interesting discussion points. So let's go ahead and explore that.
This is the tone deaf communication that demonstrates a company that is so at odds with their own game, they can't even categorize it anymore. A survival game billed as an MMO with servers barely larger than Rust's until they expanded them a tiny bit to 2,000 players that hit a peak of almost 1 million players in 2021, has now tried to sell itself as an action RPG with co-op in 2024 to lure in console players. And their clarification of all of this didn't help at all, and it really shows that they don't know what game they have anymore, if they ever did. We understand there is some confusion today around if New World Aternum will feel like the same genre of game as the New World you are playing today. And the answer is yes. New World has never fit perfectly into any label, but the New World Aternum you will play in October will feel like the same genre of game as the New World you are playing today, with lots of improvements, polish, and the opportunity to play with your friends who may be on PlayStation, Xbox, or PC. What the hell do you mean the same genre it is today? That's an MMO. It's not hard to define. It is an MMO. You have it listed on Steam as an MMO. You say it is an MMO. How do you not know that the game you have been selling to players and had an expansion for is in the MMO genre? Why can't you just say, yes, it's still an MMO? Why are you trying to sell it as an action RPG when that's not it? Unless, perhaps down the line, you actually do want to convert it into this later. Who freaking knows? Because that's the kind of like broken trust you're getting here with this Amazon Game Studios and what they've done with New World. Most players, whether it's setting the game on fire on Reddit, website comment sections, or Steam reviews, are all the most upset about the fumbling of communication to the point where people, including major outlets, were extremely confused as to whether New World has gone and pulled a Wayfinders and dropped the pretense of being an MMO at all. Turns out that no, instead we're getting a Bless Unleashed style console release. And while it remains to be seen if this will have the same trajectory as the bajillionth release and rebrand of Bless Online, there's a greater fear long term. While it may not be the way it's going now, is this the start of a full rebrand of New World into a live service game with limited multiplayer? Is the backtracking and clarification all about saving face when the reaction wasn't received well to calling it an action RPG after years of calling it an MMO? Because after all, they are still calling it an action RPG on all of their websites, and they're refusing to call it an MMO in their damn clarifications. I know it's just words, I know it's just semantics, but it's pretty damn important semantics.
Now, Redbeard brings up, I think, some really excellent points, and this hits home to me personally, where when I look at and analyze just the gaming industry in its whole, I think oftentimes where players and devs are at odds, it's due to marketing. Marketing ends up being a real big stepping point, and it can be done really well, or it can just absolutely crush your hopes and dreams. And it also then, I think, is one of the key factors in a lot of player frustration. But let's talk about action RPG versus MMO. I think if we're going to be honest with ourselves as MMO fans, we know that MMO has some baggage that hangs over it. The genre in and of itself has some shining stars, but it also has a lot of baggage that a lot of people tend to avoid. In fact, to show you guys this as an example, it took forever for Destiny to put the label MMO on the game. They kept referring it to as an action RPG, obviously in a shared world. Now, when New World is putting this marketing out on the action RPG element, it's to highlight one of the biggest things it does, what other MMOs don't do, and that's action combat. There are some obvious exceptions to this, but when it's all said and done, if you think of Throne and Liberty, if you think of just any of the games that have been launching or have been out for 15 plus years, they're pretty much tab targeted. And so New World does have, I think, that competitive advantage. And so it is, for me, as an outsider looking in at this, their advantage. They're playing to their strength and advertising their game to a whole new community, a whole new potential community, and not bringing in that baggage. Turns out you got MMO, but when they're pushing forward that action RPG, it makes sense to me. Honestly, I think it seems to be probably the smartest play when it's all said and done. But beyond the marketing alone, this really leads me to the two questions I want this video to answer. Can they actually rebuild trust? I think actually for new players, they're not going to have any of the baggage as PC players have had over the last several years, especially this year alone. We can say 2024 has been a complete disaster. With the right marketing and a quality launch, there will be some level of trust being built, but trust isn't going to be rebuilt in a day. That's why for the new players coming in, if the launch is smooth, they're not going to have to worry about rebuilding trust with that player base. But for the existing players, that's where it's not going to be about October. It's about November, December, January, February, and 2025. Getting a full roadmap that is filled with enjoyable content. It doesn't mean they're going to overwhelm us. We're not going to start seeing like 30 dungeons added per patch, but we need to see that, and we need to see some consistency. And I think over the course of the couple years, it will take those couple years. Now, why do I feel Amazon is willing to make that level of investment? They committed to this game for a 10-year plan. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to have to put out a ton of content, but I think honestly, if they were going to sit down and say, we're going to try to come out with a yearly expansion around October every year, if as a content creator, people ask me, should I get into it? And they're releasing New World Aternum, and the next October, whatever the title of the expansion is, and then just go on from there, making that yearly check-in point for marketing spend online, which then drives players back in to check out all the new content. You don't have to play just one game, and I think that's one of the signs of how things have shifted within MMOs. But the other factor to why that is we also know they're working on the Lord of the Rings MMO. So it is highly possible, regarding the reception of New World Eternum, that they do continue to support the game so that they fulfill the promise that they made with supporting this game for 10 years and shifting that over into kind of one of their cheaper studios. And when I say cheaper, I don't mean less quality. It means out of California and over, forget to wherever country, but they announced that earlier this year. Amazon is all in on games, and they're continuing to put out, I think, really interesting, options, because when it's all said and done, the MMO is the most risky investment that you could make. If somebody came to me and said, Brian, do you want to invest in this new MMO? I don't know if I could do it, because the return and the risk and the amount of time and effort it takes to actually make it doesn't necessarily seem worth it. And that's why it's always been interesting to me that Amazon actually has been, and also bringing MMOs from the East to the West, outside of just their own building, and then obviously the Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is the real reason why New World Eternum will continue, because that level of investment from a capitalized expenditure is a lower tax bracket, and it also means that they can put the work in, they can benefit their player base here, they can get real telemetry and feedback, and then they can make sure that when the Lord of the Rings MMO launches, that it is in the absolute best shape that it can be, with 10 years of experience. Maybe it'll come out before the 10-year mark, but with that experience where I as a player, you as a player, we can look and say, well, even if Amazon doesn't get Lord of the Rings right out the gate, they're not going to give up on it, because they didn't give up on New World. If they do ever give up on New World, that completely changes the equation for me personally. Now, will New World be worth returning to in October for New World Eternum? I think for players who already have the game, no matter what, as soon as the marketing spin kicks up, as soon as streamers and content creators are all talking about all the different changes, it's inevitable that it's so easy to update your game. There's no subscription. You've already owned it. You can go check out all the changes for yourself. And I bet if you've been away from the game for a long period of time, there's going to be something really exciting about stepping back into the game. You're going to remember all the things you really liked about it and all the things that you really hate about it, namely how they handled marketing and didn't release any content in 2024. Those will fade to the side and you'll go check out all the new things. Will you stick around though? Well, time will tell. I honestly think that's where New World Aeternum needs to have a roadmap, needs to deliver that content. And if they keep us guessing, and if they have another 2020, if 2025 is just like 2024, and then the game just basically is a once a year big content drop with a couple of seasons sprinkled in, well, it's going to be a nice little casual game that I like to check in from time to time and do some action RPG combat in an MMO. And that's going to be at least where I fall in to it. So I'm really curious to see ultimately how this is received. I see a lot of people have always talked about when this comes to console, I'll be willing to check it out. So it'll be interesting to see if people put their money where their mouth is. But in the long run, it is what it is. Now, when it's all said and done, like I said, I think marketing is the biggest failure New World has ever had. And I think the team hopefully is learning the lessons, but time will fortunately tell. But Redbeard actually had one final point that he made, and it was actually, as a Final Fantasy XIV player myself, I'm very interested to kind of talk about it. So let's let him pop back in.
Not just players like me who want the more classic experience, but any player of any MMO. I don't think that you're going to have someone from Final Fantasy XIV that would be very happy and excited to hear their game referred to as an action RPG where if you want to, you can co-op.
When Redbeard brought up Final Fantasy XIV, I thought it was really interesting because Final Fantasy XIV can be played with optional co-op, and that's where we've seen kind of this curse of the MMO, especially with players who have fondness for how they used to run, but the practical realities of running and maintaining a profitable MMO means that you have to bring in way more people. And in a world of Fortnite and Minecraft that have captured so much of the next generation's youth, where they still play those games, decades later. In fact, that's what the numbers within the video game industry reflect, is just how much people are playing older games. Well, I think essentially you got to come up with new and interesting ways to entice people to at least be given your game a chance. And unfortunately, as an MMO player who thinks that MMO should mean massively multiplayer online, but we've seen it move to what I call MSO, massively single player online, or optional MMO. Those are the things that have kind of come in play because it's able to attract a bigger audience that is at least going to maybe spend some money on the store. Now, all said and done, we'll be following this up with coverage and also additional thoughts as we barrel towards that release. There's still Throne of Liberty that we're going to be playing and talking about in the month of September. August is kind of the month of WoW. There's other games that I'm looking forward to playing. Obviously, if you guys haven't seen No Rest for the Wicked, it's incredible. I've been really loving that game. Visions of Mana is coming out this month, and also Wukong. Apparently, I'm getting that with my new PC. So hopefully my new PC, being that it's Intel, I have really concerns, but I'm hearing some BIOS updates have gone out. Wish me luck. It hasn't shipped yet, but we're still waiting to replace the old PC here in the office. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for being here. Thank you to my members here on the channel. Thank you guys to those who've hit that like button and those who also have hit that dislike button. I appreciate any and all engagement that you guys are willing to toss my way. Thank you guys for your time. Hopefully I will see you in my next video, but until then, take care.